Hi there, welcome to a deep focused video where we acknowledge and understand what are the deep hidden secret needs and desires from a trauma survivor, a person who may have PTSD, complex PTSD, maybe even survivor's guilt, what they've gone through in the past, where they are now, what's left of them, what may be missing now, what may have never been there, but there is still that want and that need, the hope to be able to experience something physical, mental, psychological, etc. Join me today as we go through it bit by bit, explaining the backstory, understanding the importance behind those needs and wants, and also acknowledging why it's a secret in the first place, especially when it comes to new upcoming relationships, when they may be with a new partner, but there might feel like a breakdown in communication or that not everything has been addressed. There is a reason behind it. It can be a form of an emotional wall, an act of a self-defense mechanism to protect themselves, to protect what they want within, and to keep and maintain that level of peace and outwards peace without triggering any negative reactions or responses from around them. What I would like to say before going any further, if you are interested in these type of videos, I do have a full playlist on psychology, relationships, trauma, etc., and healing, recovery, and all of that. If you'd like to look back on any videos you've missed out on, don't worry, that's all available. Top right corner where the eye symbol is up there. If you click on it, you'll get a drop-down menu box with the playlist, and you'll be able to find it all in one place. What I also want to say is, just as a trigger warning, if this video does get heavy at any point and it's hard to listen to, or it's a bit too raw and real, you can always pause the video, take a breath, have a moment, take some time out, or if you need to take a step back and then rewatch the video on a different day, you're more than welcome to do so. You do whatever you need to do and what makes you feel most comfortable. With that all being said, when it comes to the meaning, the definition of secret needs and desires, it's certain requirements which can fall under physical wants and psychological mental wants when it comes to being in a relationship, and also how they feel within it on a personal basis, and how they feel and how they would want to be treated by the other half. That's what it comes down to. It tends to be requirements and wishes of a positive nature, and then even the absence of the negatives which have been present in the past with a previous relationship. It's like trying to escape the darkness to be surrounded by the light. But when during the period of uncertainty or in between light and dark, it's like trying to figure out what can be achieved, what can't, what's practical, what isn't. Is this new relationship able to give what I want and require and need? Is the other half able, willing, open-minded, patient to give or show it in some way, or even receive? So there can be a lot of thoughts and questions at the beginning of a relationship. If it's held at arm's length, for example, there could be a testing waters, feeling out process in the survivor, testing the waters to see if things are safe, secure, and possible, and treating each little moment as a milestone. And for them, it could be a major one, depending on the severity of their struggles and how they've been treated previously. Now, for some people out there, who may have had a bad past and been around bad people, how they were treated poorly. That might be all they know, but deep down, they hope for better. They wish for better treatment. Whether they feel deserving of it or not, depending on how they were treated, there is still a feeling within, a hunger that can be within the heart. It can be even within the mind. There might be other people out there that once had certain feelings, physical, mental, which were positive, but they were temporary as they were taken, ripped from them abruptly by the hands of a bad person, or the loss of someone triggering survivor's guilt, or in a manipulative situation where positives, comfort, warmth was provided and stability, but it was a mask to cover the real true form of that bad individual. So when it came round to their true self, showing the survivor, the one back at the time with the symptoms on the receiving end of poor treatment, they wouldn't have been anticipating all of that to come. They see the positives first. It's what attracts them to someone. But if it's false or fake, it can lead to a major breach in trust issues and can have lasting effects into the future. So a person's wants, what's within their heart, what they feel, what they require, what they would love, ends up being shut away, locked off, sealed up, where only they can feel it from time to time, but they may not be able to show it, explain it, or want to, because they may have trust issues on top of other problems. So there's some of the reasons as to why it can remain hidden. And slowly with time, some elements could show through conversation direct or through non-verbal cues. Other times, it may not actually be said, but deep down they're just wishing that this happens, followed by that, followed by this, and so on. And when it does happen, they may not even acknowledge it, but they will feel it within. Sometimes, just like with a silent battle, there are silent needs and silent victories and silent moments of feeling good in the moment and around someone. But it's about bridging that gap. So you could have such a situation where the survivor and the new partner can experience, be on the same wavelength, understand one another without having to say much at all, but feeling the same things. That's one of the ultimate goals for a possible survivor of traumatic events in the past. Like with PTSD, for example, it's dealing with the past, but in the present, due to intrusive thoughts, possible unresolved trauma, and the level of maltreatment from back then, which has had a lasting impact. Besides being treated badly, it's what's being taken in the process, as in levels of innocence, levels of warmth, levels of trust, levels of reliability, and even maybe levels of independence, which was stripped in some ways through controlling natures. And that if a survivor managed to escape or the other half passed away under certain circumstances, for the survivor of trauma, it should be seen as a victory that they've gotten out of it. But deep down, they'll be thinking, at what cost? What have I lost along the way? What was promised but never fully delivered? What type of hole or void has been left and created inside for a deep longing of it being filled with goodness, but not knowing how, when, or why it's going to happen? And still feeling forms of insecurity and instability because of the past, the turbulence of it, the environment that it was, toxic, loud, messy, chaotic, troublesome, and it took a wear and tear on the person's own mental health and physical health. So when they're finally in a position where they can be a little bit more themselves and finally be treated the way they should be, it can seem foreign to them. It can seem like they're maybe not deserving of it because they've never felt that before. So beside what they keep locked inside to protect themselves, if they do indirectly come across that good treatment for once, they may still be hesitant. They may treat it as a trap, as a catch, that there's got to be something negative attached to it at the end. And that might be because it stems back to how the process was done with a previous bad partner, showed the nice side, the loving side, the love bombing, got them wrapped around the finger, and then showed the true colours, and then reinforced with a form of trauma bonding too. So it adds a deep level of complexity. That can tie in with the mask as well. The mask is a act where a survivor, such as through trauma, PTSD, is good at hiding their symptoms, good at hiding their struggles, while the same way as they may be good at hiding the positives, what they want, what they require out of a relationship. In some ways, certain circumstances, they may feel that they don't have a say in a new relationship because they already feel bad enough for surviving if there was a form of survivor's guilt, just as an example. They, in other cases, may feel like they don't have a say in a brand new relationship and the other half makes the final calls and the ball is always in their court and not the survivors of trauma. Reason why is because how they were treated in the past, the power dynamics were unbalanced and was in favour of the bad partner, the controlling, the nasty one. So it made the person on the receiving end feel small, feel insignificant, put down, belittled, ridiculed, humiliated, treated poorly, and disrespected. It shouldn't be like that, but that's how it unfortunately was back then. That kind of a wearing effect on the person of the receiving end. They may even be convinced or may internalize those negative, subjective, toxic thoughts and apply it to themselves, that it's true and that they don't have a say and that anything that they like or want is invalid. So if they are in a new relationship, they hold off from expressing themselves and instead they wear a mask and appear functioning, whether that be a mask of positivity and loudness, whether it be a mask of assertiveness, being strong, being overly independent, and a hard exterior, being somewhat sharp, attentive, punctual, but not letting that mask slip, keeping up an act, a performance. It can come in different ways, these masks. It's a trauma response. It's a survival instinct, defense mechanism of the brain. Put on an exterior, a shield to cover one's own true emotion. So if they're smiling on the outside, there's a chance that they could be sad on the inside. If they're quite loud and talkative on the outside, deep within, they may be the opposite, very quiet, subdued, or they wish and hoped that they could be that way. However, in certain circumstances and environments, they have no choice but to maintain a fake persona or an alternative alter ego of themselves. Sometimes a mask doesn't have to be completely fake. What it can be is them using an older version, almost like downloading data from the past of how they originally were, maybe before an abusive relationship, maybe before the trauma. They bring that old version of them back to try and either pretend to be and feel more normal, return back to that state, even though they know deep within that they don't feel normal, but they wear that mask to try and pretend to be the person they once were before the darkness took over and consumed them. So maybe they are loud, chatty, talkative, have an imagination, very creative, and all of that, interactive, That might be the person who they once were, who then they lost and recently tried gaining back to appear more normal, to be more themselves and to blend in with the crowd. Sometimes masking is done to avoid questioning. Masking is done to avoid people taking pity on the survivor. One of the core needs and wants and hopes from a survivor of trauma is to just be treated normal and to feel normal, not to get overly special treatment where it feels like they're a test subject or they're the odd one out. They've already been made to feel bad in the past. They don't want to feel any other bad things or unusual encounters in the present and onwards. They just want to live a normal life or somewhat of a normal life. Whether, so that's certain aspects to look at. The mask is an invisible barrier because on the outside, when people see a person's face, their voice, their tone, they may just assume that, oh, that's just who they are, that's the person that they are, and it's natural. But what a person shows on the outside could be very different to what's on the inside and what they may be feeling. So it's the equivalent to desires and needs. That a survivor trauma could say that they may want this or like this and like that, but deep down they've actually got other requirements and other hopes and wishes, but they feel like they aren't in a position to share it just yet. Maybe because it's too soon. Maybe because they feel if they did open up, they would fear coming across as too needy and demanding. There's nothing needy or demanding about it, but to them, they may be hyper vigilant and think that of the other half because they don't want to lose or ruin this current relationship. They've had bad encounters in the past. They don't want another one. They've had encounters in the past where they may have been blamed or led to believe that they're the problem for the loss of someone or the loss and a breakup. So they feel that the power's in their hand this time, that if they wear that mask, they control the situation and keep the relationship going, but at a distance. The cost of distance, but the maintenance of keeping it stable. However, because of that lack of direct communication, those inner, deeper needs and desires not coming through, the survivor doesn't get the full experience, the full healing, the full recovery, and the full closure and the complete connection with someone. And they'll feel that within, that there is still an absence, but it's like a gap that they need to jump over, but it feels very difficult. For the other half, it can feel like stagnation, not quite getting anywhere or slowing down, and if there's no communication, they're going to wonder what's up and what's wrong. It's about trying to bridge that gap. And before making a leap, it's important to understand the backstory behind all this, from what is a secret, what is a desire, it's a psychological need and want which they wish for and longed for. The reason why it remains hidden is because they either feel ashamed or guilty of saying what they really want, especially if there was the death of someone in the past. They may feel like they aren't deserving of anything else. They've already been given the gift of life and surviving, and that's too much to even bear and accept, So on top of life, having another shot, another chance of a relationship when a previous person can't anymore, a person with survivor's guilt may feel like they're not allowed, they're not entitled. And if by some chance they do get close to another person, they don't feel that they're entitled, they don't feel deserving of being able to put their needs across to the other half. So then they can get closer and things can be strengthened. The survivor just doesn't feel worthy, deserving, or like it's the correct time because they're still dealing with unresolved troubles and problems. So it can be a very tricky situation, but I have done previous videos on survivor's guilt, overcoming it, freeze response, overcoming that. If you need backstory and further context, as I said, those videos are available in the playlist, top right corner where the I symbol is. So the mask can be applied anytime in life, in relationships, within the world, in public, any place, anywhere, anytime, where the survivor feels like they need to. The mask is a form of protection, self-protection from the environment and the people around. It's done as a means of avoidance, avoiding showing their inner true self out of fear of how others may judge them and think less, or worry, or panic, or feel disgusted. That can stem back to how the survivor was treated by a previous partner or groups of friends and people in the past, where they reacted badly, negatively for no reason, or they just felt like leaving the person on the receiving end to take all that abuse, all that verbal criticism, all that physical hell and more. So to avoid that happening and re-emerging, to avoid seeing people's judgment, conclusions, and to avoid any conflict or arguments which they may not wish or hope for because it was bad enough previous, the mask comes on, pretending to be normal, pretending like everything is okay when it really isn't, and even when in a relationship, getting so far but keeping a distance, not being able to get the full experience but doing it for the sake of protection, both ways, but more so self-protection. The mask sometimes can slip because, in fairness, keeping up a certain persona, an act, a performance, or pretending to be something that they're not can be very exhausting because it requires frequency, consistency, and depth. It's like acting in a film, a movie, a different accent, different body language, different behavior, different wants and needs and backstory, putting yourself in the shoes of a completely different person or putting yourself in the shoes of a past version of one's self before the darkness. By maintaining that, it requires physical and mental strength, resilience, focus, and it will consume and eat up a lot of energy. On top of any other struggles, even if it be OCD, overthinking, scanning the room for threats, the environment, having trust issues, driven by PTSD, and dealing with intrusive thoughts and past memories, and any other health-related issues physically, it can be a battleground of obstacles. So by the end of the day, the mask might slip, they might be exhausted. And if not that, maybe after weeks or months of wearing a mask, pretending it's all fine and okay, and that they have everything that they already want with that partner when deep down they haven't quite reached it or have not touched the surface yet, the mask slips or could. Maintaining it all that time, pretending to be fine or pretending to be something else, all that time resisting those urges and impulses, even the positive ones. It's not always negative. A trauma survivor may get bursts of happiness and energy and they don't know where to put it. It could come across as cute aggression, where they just want to pounce metaphorically onto a new partner and make the most and live in the moment and enjoy it. However, there might be forms of holding back through the self-defense mechanisms, as in an internal thought could be, yes, you are excited. I do feel excited. I've got so much energy within and I want to show it. I want to share it with the other person. Or there's a lot of love or passion to give, but is it quite the right time? Is it too soon? Is it too full on? What happens if I release everything within onto that person? All the positive emotions, all the love, all the deep desires and needs that have been craved for many weeks, months, years. Will that person be able to cope? Will that person acknowledge and understand why I'm the way I am? Or will they get too overwhelmed? Will they think less of me because that would make me feel ashamed or guilty or feel really bad about the situation? So it's not just holding back the negatives and pretending to be okay, but it's also holding back the positive feelings and emotions and maintaining somewhat of a stable baseline. But Suppressing negative feelings can build with time and it gets harder to maintain, hence why the mask can slip. And then equally, suppressing positive feelings can be like a balloon which grows with size and then may eventually burst. And then, yes, it could lead to a flurry of positivity, love bombing, but in a genuine way because they really want to show it towards a new person and partner. But then after doing it, there may be a vulnerability hangover or a form of love, guilt, and shame because they feel like they've let themselves down for letting the mask drop. And it makes them panic and worry that their true self has been too seen by the other half and worries what may happen next. They may blame themselves, like through deep-rooted guilt from the past, of also being blamed too for other situations which have been internalized and just accepted, where by showing positivity or happiness in a vulnerable way, in their mind, based on how they were conditioned in the past, is seen as a weakness and a bad thing. So in their own voice or head, the demons take over, manifesting as a past partner by saying that they failed, that they've messed up, it wasn't the right thing to do, it was weak. And then it's like torturing oneself, punishing oneself, and then withdrawing, pulling back, the push-pull, avoidant attachment behavior when it comes to a new relationship. So just simply when it comes to needs, desires, wants, the mask holds it all back, makes the situation complex for all parties involved, but more importantly, makes it much more challenging for the person who's dealing with the symptoms. On a surface level, a person that wears a mask whilst dealing with a lot of issues, even if they partially opened up to someone about them, others around could see that survivor as really strong, resilient, and amazing, and has everything held together. But maybe, possibly deep down, that survivor feels the complete opposite inside. Or maybe they're just simply totally sick and tired of having to be this way. Tired of having to be the strong one, having to keep it all together whilst crumbling inside. That can lead to a psychological response of a deep need and want, and we'll get into that very shortly. But first of all, let's acknowledge the physical wants and needs when it comes to certain desires. Physically is just as important as psychologically. The physical aspects is what can set the tone for the room, the environment where a relationship is in. The room and location for where two people are together, where memories are forged and created. Things like that have happened in the past, but it wasn't always for the good reasons, the bad reasons, more so. Whether that be negativity, darkness taking over. So there is that in terms of trying to establish a new norm, a new situation, a new relationship, that want and need of certain physical requirements, vice versa. For example, to be looked at equally, not just mentally, but physically, where the other half looks at that survivor on level, not looking down and not looking up, but looking head on. Another form of physicality which they would wish for is not for one to stand behind the other or the other way around, or for one to stand in front. The want and need from a survivor to be able to stand side by side, hand in hand, to be able to face everything together and see everything together and experience everything together. The highs, the lows, the positives, the negatives. No power dynamic shifts of one person pulling and the other person being dragged along. By it being physically side by side and metaphorically as a symbolism, side by side, meaning an equal relationship, and even a physical equal relationship. Now, the survivor has or is dealing with forms of inadequacy, feeling unequal, where they don't belong on the same wavelength as that other half, or they don't feel worthy. Those issues can stem back from the past. I have done a video on that, challenging and coping and healing from feelings of being unequal. That video is also available in the playlist, top right corner where the eye symbol is up there. But deep down, beside the feeling of inadequacy and being unequal, we're focusing in on the deep-rooted needs and wants and desires, things which are maybe locked deep within the body, felt or heard at times by the survivor, but they may not always consider it or chase it or pursue it, or more importantly, put it across to the other person because they may feel it's a far reach in order to do that at this moment. But even if it feels impossible, it's not impossible, realistically. But it's important to acknowledge what a survivor of trauma may want and require at given points in times to be able to heal and to be able to feel alive again. And the physical aspect is a very important one because it's also a grounding feeling. So when it comes to being looked at equally, eye contact made, a connection formed, a level of understanding, being seen but not overseen, being acknowledged. That's what they would hope for. And the reason why it could be intense and also hidden, just being looked at equally, which could be a basic requirement in a relationship or what would make a relationship healthy, to them it's something forbidden or deep rooted because at some point in the past with a previous partner they may have not been looked at as an equal. They may have been literally looked down at because of the power dynamics, as in the bad partner and ex being the controlling one physically, mentally, and the other on the receiving end being made to feel small, having to look up physically and mentally, taking orders, following demands, avoiding consequences and pleasing the other half, not because they want to, but they wanted and needed to survive. So for once, being able to break that cycle where they don't have to look up, they don't have to look down, they don't have to be ordered about, they can just look straight ahead, as in moving forwards, but so does the other person. Matching that energy, matching that physical connection, building that chemistry. When one person looks at the other equally, it can show a level of trust and belief within that. When one looks at the other head on and eye contact is made, it's like a brain-to-brain connection, and that the other person thinks somewhat highly of the survivor and worthy enough of being acknowledged and looked at and appreciated, even if it is just in silence, non-verbal communication, but with eye contact. And it's that metaphor, as in life and onwards, as chaotic and as stormy as the past has been and the weight that does carry over with people with PTSD, to be able to look ahead, a clearer, brighter future, and to be able to do that beside another person, in silence or not, on the same wavelength, with the same vision, that's what can help with growth. Because the survivor has survived long enough, doing the best that they can, but there's a chance that they want to continue it, but now in the presence of another person for different reasons and more. And the beginning of being looked at equally then can set the tone for the future, as in being looked at as a couple, as a team. So the physicality of eye contact, which then creates the mental image and visions for the present and what could be for the future, creating that ultimate potential, not one-sided, but shared amongst the couple, the survivor and the new partner. The survivor may want that deep down, but it might feel a long way off. So the simple beginnings can just be eye contact on the same level, at the same wavelength, and keeping it simple and building off from that. They may not say that's what they want, but they may feel and hope for it, that the other half can provide it naturally. Because sometimes these needs and wants don't want to be addressed or acknowledged, because then it feels like having to control the narrative and the situation. It should be natural, and some of the more basic needs in a relationship should be fulfilled regardless, at points, at times. When it feels like you got to order people about and say this and that as prompts and reminders, it feels like the other person can't be bothered, or it requires too much hard work and effort to a survivor that has already gone through a lot of hard work and hard times, on top of keeping up a mask, which is hard work and daily responsibilities. They may just want a simple, easy life, or to begin with, an easy relationship to then heal, recover, and expand on it. If there's a lot of work behind it, it might be too much, but that can be explained a little bit more later. Beside being looked at equally, the other aspect, when the time is right, being able to be held gently, and such as being hugged, as simple as that can be, it can be a major milestone for a trauma survivor, especially if they've been physically mistreated in the past and trust was broken, which in the present it can lead to shifts in intimacy and more distance, flinching and protecting oneself, being hesitant to hug another person, or maybe more so a partner, a person of the opposite gender, such as in a beginning of a relationship, seeing it as a step too far, having a bit of physical distance, arm's length. But deep down, that survivor who sees the good and potential in that new partner, deep down may wish and hope that they can hug the other person to build that connection and to feel closer. And that can be encouraged and intensified within, with their own internal mental struggle, with their struggles which the other person may not know of or may not be experiencing themselves. It can create an isolating, lonely time, even despite being in a new relationship. It can further enhance that deep-seated need and want to just be able to reach out with arms and grab that person within reason and hold them tight, or more so, for the other half to reach out and grab that survivor and hold them tight, to build that trust, rebuild that reassurance, that safety, that stability, that frequency, and that consistency. Many factors and physical feelings which were once present in the past but then taken away or corrupted by darkness, or that these needs and wants were never actually met back then, but in their heart, their hopes and dreams when they were younger, growing up, that's what they wished for but never came close to. But now comes a time where there might be hope, there might be a chance, and fighting through all that darkness, going through that storm and their own demons, while still carrying some of the scars and the weight from the past, there's a bit more space now to think and feel. That's when the heart can flare up in an intense way. That's why certain emotions can be quite strong in the beginning of relationships, the first few months, and then later on there can be a drop period, or it can go backwards, and to them it might seem confusing, but it can result and stem back from the honeymoon phase of a fresh beginning, a fresh start, feeling all the positive emotions all over again, then being met with the stagnation of their own internal struggles and barriers and needs and wants not being truly met, because they're dealing with an invisible barrier which may prevent them from expressing it. And their fears and worries are, if they physically get too close to the other person, will it put them off? Will it drive them away? You know, in a normal relationship, it would be embraced and appreciated, if not more. But to them, it's the unknown. Because of the past, it's left them feeling a bit wobbly and unsure with themselves and unsure with how the other person may think and feel. But when a survivor has fought in the darkness, survived through the winters alone, it can be very cold, physically and mentally, and taxing on the body. Just that want and that need to be hugged, to be reminded they're not alone, to be reminded that they don't have to do it alone, all the time. That physical hug or that physical holding of the hands, breaking through that intimacy blockage and connecting further and reaching new milestones bit by bit, little ones treated as big victories. When held in arms or cradled or simply holding hands, besides that physical connection, it creates a healthy crutch so that when the survivor struggles or has bad days, they're not falling flat on the ground. There is a safety blanket, a safety net within reason. It's not overused, it's not exploited, it's just there as a level of protection. But it enables both people to be in the same space and for the disconnect to be eased, even during tough times. To the survivor, a physical touch done the right way kind of rights the wrongs of the past for how they may have been physically approached the wrong ways. In the present, not just the physicality, the touch, the treatment and all that, but just a general theme of wanting the complete opposite. So everything that was bad and all the badness that happened back then, they long for all the opposites to happen in the present, as in the positives. So if they were shouted at back then, they would hope to be spoken to calmly now. If they were mistreated and maltreatment physically and all of that, they'd hope to be gently reassured and held when ready and when there's consent, without it getting too much. Just slow and simple movement. Slow, simple hand movements, gentle holding of hands, a gentle tap on the wrist, sensory touches, building that slow connection and rebuilding trust, which was lost and broken in the past. It's a very slow building phase. Whilst a relationship can build and form, what's happening in parallel is a form of passive healing by righting the wrongs of the past, by finding a new person in the present and wishing and hoping for the opposites, all the positives to happen, for all the wants and needs within to be fulfilled. But it might be in a situation where there's a lot, or the deep and powerful, and the survivor may feel early in a relationship or mid-range in, maybe too much to ask, that they're demanding too much, and they may feel greedy or cheeky for asking or wanting it, and the other half may have a go. So it's easier to just keep quiet and just keep a mask, keep a performance, and keep the relationship at arm's length to protect themselves. But whilst that's going on, it doesn't stop what they really want within. It doesn't end what they feel within towards the other person, what they wish for, and what happens next. So being held gently kind of creates a wall, a soft wall of reassurance that they've got you in the arms, that you're not going to fall, you're not going to drop, you're not going to be abandoned physically as well. That ties on with the next want and need, to feel warmth, not just psychologically, but more so physically. Physically feeling warmth can relax the body and relax the mind, make them feel comfortable, makes them feel welcomed, makes them feel valued and appreciated. And that can tie back from being looked at equally. That creates a psychological feeling of warmth and acceptance. That's what a survivor would want. Acceptance for who they are, who they once were, and what they've gone through. To not be looked at less, but to be accepted for who they are in the moment, and the supposed struggles and baggage which they may carry over with them, the weight on their shoulders. But it might seem too scary to open all that up in hopes of being accepted. So that's why the mask is worn, but still deep down, they wish they could, without any consequences, release all that weight, release all that tension, release everything inside and get rid of it in some way, or share it with someone without the fear or worries of consequence. And then that would create levels of warmth, stability, acceptance. Now, that can't be met immediately. Other forms would be being hugged, being held. That creates the physical warmth, keeping the body warm. If there was a time or a simple standard moment where the survivor simply felt cold because of the temperature, because of the weather, but the other half was there present to wrap a coat around them, to take their coat off and to put it over the shoulders of the other half, that would create a grounding effect. It would show a level of care, consideration, and effort being made. Other core wants and needs which the survivor may have not experienced by past relationships because they weren't put first. They may have not been treated as priority. They weren't looked after, they weren't cared, they weren't supported. If they got wet, if they got cold, they were just left to deal with it. If they felt bored or sad, that they were just left and abandoned to deal with it, and silent treatment was given, creating isolation and punishment and consequences, and almost like a form of reinforcement that if they do express their needs, if they feel cold, if they feel bored, if they feel sad, they're not allowed to because it leads to silent treatment. They may internalize that and apply it in the present by wearing a mask, pretending to be okay. Even it's as simple as, the temperature, the body's temperature, how the mind feels in the moment, tired or not, sad or more so happy, faking it, hiding it from the real needs and the real feelings and emotions, because when it was expressed in the past, it didn't end too well, the fear of that will happen again. So it's best just to keep everything basic, simple, even if it's not genuine or real. So they're suffering in silence. By being physically held and feeling that physical warmth, it can tick some of the boxes. And in moments and examples of being outside, if it rained or it was flooded and then the other person picked the survivor up and carried them back home, or picked them up and carried them through a muddy field, or carrying them through a flooded puddle street. It shows a level of consideration, a caring act, right? Even holding the door open for them. Even simple actions like that, which they may have not experienced previously, or it was taken from them, but they weren't given that comfort, they weren't given that warmth. Warmth can come from being accepted. Warmth can come from being held physically, which creates safety and security. Warmth can come from a person's internal inner state of mind, of feeling that they belong and that they are safe themselves and they can be whoever they want to be in the moment without any fears or worries. That can happen progressively with time when around the right person. But in the moment, early stages, it might seem far off, and it's easier holding that memory of happiness and the what ifs inside than living it and it possibly being lost or taken or corrupted. Sometimes fantasies are kept just as fantasies, so you feel all the positives without the negatives. But a survivor is deserving of their fantasies becoming a reality. So, beside the warmth factor, other aspects tying in is just to be able to fall at certain times, for the other half to take lead, and for the person, the survivor that falls, that has a moment of weakness, a struggle, an episode, a PTSD flare-up, to be able to suffer but not in silence, to be able to process it in the moment and deal with it, but still having the presence of someone about who remains like an anchor to them. Not that they have to be strong 24/7, but to have a level of reassurance and reducement of the fear of abandonment. Because if a trauma survivor from the past or in between had gone through any other encounters, friendships or relationships where they were abandoned or let go of. That can create that deep-rooted fear of, are they the problem? Is their struggles, their problems too much for everyone? Are they a burden on other people's lives? So maybe don't show it, suffer in silence, keep it closed, push it under the rug. Sometimes people push it under the rug as a coping mechanism for themselves, but they may also do it for the safety and sake and consideration of others around because they feel it's the best approach. However, that can build an overwhelm and can burst or spill. So given the chance or opportunity, a survivor may deeply crave the ability to be able to have a moment, to be able to fall, but to be catched in the arms, physically and metaphorically speaking, by the hands of the other half, the significant other. To have a moment of weakness, but for it not to be taken advantage of. To have a moment of sadness without being judged. To be able to feel blank and confused or lost without any demands or requirements or answers from the other half. To just be able to be still and it be accepted. And maybe in some ways, deep needs and wants, as in hoping that maybe beside understanding that the other half can join in, like with moments of silence, non-verbal communication, to bring people closer together, one who has the struggles, the other who may not, but then for them to be shared within reason in a healthy way. So the action of being led isn't a means of a power dynamic imbalance, but it's what they may wish for and hope that when they fall, that when their darkness takes over or if they struggle, they hope and wish that the other partner doesn't crumble either because of them, because they would feel really bad about it, that their darkness has consumed another person, and they would blame themselves for it. If the other partner can remain strong or honest and try and stand upright and try the best that they can to be there for the other person, it rebuilds and reinforces and forges that level of deep-rooted trust, which may have been long lost in the past elsewhere, building it back up the same way as them rebuilding their heart on their own terms when they're able and when they're strong enough. But at times when they're not strong enough, the other person takes over, but not in a controlling way, but just to be present and, there physically as well as emotionally. So it could stem back to in the past in a controlling bad relationship where through wear and tear the survivor on the receiving end did reach limits, did break down, did get emotional, did cry, did scream because they've had enough at the time. And what did the other half do? Were they supportive? Did they listen? Did they do anything good? No, they may have flipped the tables and then used that against the survivor and blamed them for the outburst, blamed them for being crazy, for causing all the problems when it was actually the other way around, using the survivor as a scapegoat, twisting it beyond belief, ultimate manipulation. That causes a lot of struggles and problems for the survivor. So the opposite of that in the present day would be falling, collapsing, but not landing on a hard surface, but landing in the arms and the warmth of someone that isn't there to manipulate. They're not there to twist the words. They're there to remain in silence, but to remain tall and still. Being still can be a deep-rooted need within a person that has a very chaotic, messy mind, or that's how it feels for them, with all that noise inside and movement manifesting, when in contrast with a still figure, it builds reassurance. It builds an unwavering, undying, unyielding presence which can't be rivaled with anything else about. It's unparalleled to everything. that one person remains a constant in the survivor's life long term. And it's slowly built and forged in the beginning, slowly through physical action and psychological behavior. Even doing nothing is more grounding and healing than being proactive and just running away. Being still and present is what the survivor would hope for, but they probably wouldn't ask or talk about it outwardly. And as well, they wouldn't expect or have that high expectation of it to happen. They would wish and hope for it, but they may not feel it's likely to happen, whether because they don't feel deserving of it, or they just feel like no normal human would put up with all this mess and darkness within me. But this is the reality. And this is just to put across in general. Perfect relationships don't exactly exist. Normal, somewhat healthy relationships can happen and occur in which there is no hard work, there's no excess baggage, and people just meet up and grow that way. But at some point down the line in life, shit will go downhill. There will be difficult moments, and then that will be the time for one or the other person to step the hell up and support the other person. If it can be done then and accepted, it should also be done and accepted at the beginning. A person can appear fine and okay at the start and be welcomed and accepted. Oh, but then later they become broken or worn down by stuff, but they're still accepted and loved for who they are. Then why can't that happen the moment two people meet? Because the concept is, if it happens at the beginning, where a person who may feel broken falls, collapses, the other half catches them, understands them, sees the potential within, and sees the light within the dark. If that happens so early on in a relationship and it can stand the test of time and it's possible, then it makes everything else onwards in life a little bit easier and strengthens the relationship much stronger than any other relationship out there, because you've been through the hard times, you've been through the difficult moments, you experienced the darkest moments early on. So you know what to expect. All other relationships where it's all fine and perfect, that's positive as well. But then it's that unknown and uncertainty of, will one another be there for each other when darkness does come about in the future? When there is a tragedy, when there is an unexpected event, how will they react then? It's unknown of. But if you're already dealing with chaos, with the storm, with the noise, with the darkness, with the demons, one or the other, shared equally or what, and it's more so from the past, but it can be accepted and understood. It's a feeling and a need which a survivor may feel is impossible for someone else to accept or to take the challenge upon. But if it can be shown, it does a whole lot of good for the survivor longer term. It is a much deeper need, that, but it's still a valid one within the person with the symptoms. Someone with PTSD or OCD or complex PTSD or survivor's guilt or a mixture of them deserve that deep reassurance and acceptance despite the situation, as long as there's a level of communication. And it sounds like common sense, this, but as long as the one with the symptoms and the struggles can still be on a basic level, show respect and to be kind and as best as they can, right? Of course, darkness can be powerful and consume people's souls and persona, and mask can be positive and all good when it might not actually be their true self, but there's still a core, bare, basic, positive elements within them, and it can be seen and felt by the other half. That's what matters, and that's what always needs to be remembered. So during the low times, any episodes, any flashbacks, it's the trauma talking, it's the defense mechanisms responding. It's not the real person, as in them doing it on purpose, as a falling out of love or respect. It's them coping and surviving. If the other half at any point could share that across to a non-verbal communicator, It could make them feel less alone and more heard and understood within, as in the survivor now knows that the other half knows what's really going on. But that takes time through learning, through listening, social cues, patterns and trends. It can be time consuming, but if it's important, if it's worth it, then it's worth fighting for. So, beside all that, being able to rest, being able to sleep, that's another core requirement, more so hope and wish when it comes to a survivor. You might wonder, in what way exactly? Well, it can come down to when the survivor is feeling heavy in the head, tired, or even ill. A physical illness, a flu, a cold, or something worse or more serious. Or they've had a busy day, or they've had a certain amount of food and it's made them feel tired. Any form of physical, mental tiredness or fatigue, maybe even paired with wearing a mask all day around many different people, and then it's slipping or dropping just a little bit. The reason why it's a deep-seated need and want within a survivor of trauma and past relationships which went bad, to be able to sleep without consequence, to be able to drop off in the moment, whether that be in the arms of the other half or already in bed, without having to explain themselves too much and without having to apologize the next day. A simple apology or a basic one here and there is normal, but avoiding that overly apologeticness in which the survivor had used it to adapt and cope as a means of de-escalating any conflict and trying to reassure people and apologize for their actions, in which it's just a normal human biological response to dealing with stress or tiredness or fatigue. It's normal to sleep, it's normal to drop off. It could even stem to medication, certain medication which can make people sleep better but also drop off quicker. That for the other half that may not be a deep sleeper or may not need medication, so they're awake when the survivor does fall off to sleep, being able, for the survivor at least, to wake up the next day or whenever without questioning, without interrogation, without having to apologize or made to feel bad. Sometimes the survivor may automatically do all that and consider at the moment they wake up feeling panic and worry. Did they let the other person down? Did falling asleep come across as a lack of love or a lack of respect, almost a disrespectful act, when the other half was still present, talking or hanging out? For the survivor who may have just felt physically or mentally exhausted from the day, being able to sleep, relax, however, they feel guilty about it the next morning. All that can stem back from the past, whether that be down to sleep deprivation back then, whether it be when they did sleep, naturally, the other half punished them for it and made it out to be a bad act. That whenever they go to sleep, they should be punished or ashamed that they did or feel guilty for it. That the other half, the controlling one in the past, could have twisted it as in the act of the other half going to sleep for obvious reasons and normal reasons was made out to be something much more than what it really needed to be. Hyperinflated, exaggerated, and twisted, made out to be a form of abandonment, making the survivor of it all feel really bad, feeling like they've put the other half through a lot of hell and suffering, when it wasn't really the case. But the controlling person changed the narrative in an unnatural way and made the other half feel responsible for that and much more, creating a cycle and loop and the conditioning of overly apologetic behaviour, where any downfall or shortcoming, even by the hands of someone else, mistakes even by the hands of someone else, the survivor feels responsible and will always apologise for themselves and even apologise on behalf of another person to de-escalate the situation. A fawning, people-pleasing response as a survival mechanism. All that can be tiring, and going through that cycle of sleeping, dropping off, waking up, feeling panic, feeling anxiety, feeling dread, flashbacks to, well, what's going to happen now? Like the past, falling asleep, punished for it, made to be the bad person. Will that happen in the moment now? I must apologise. Please forgive me. I'm sorry. The other half likely is fine with it and says, no worries, it's okay. But to the survivor, it seems like a do or die situation because they're still reliving the consequences of the past, which have been learned and conditioned within the mind. So ultimately, what that survivor long wishes for is to have a peaceful, quiet rest during the day, a power nap, or a nice deep sleep at night time, and to be able to wake up feeling refreshed, wake up feeling relaxed and calm without that intensity or the cortisol levels being too high, without any anxiety being spiked, without any feelings of guilt or shame, and without having to feel the need to apologize to the other half. Elements of that hopes and needs and wishes can also tie in with the physical aspect. Once again, falling asleep in the arms of the other partner and the other partner allowing it and not waking the person up, just allowing it, putting little gestures to show that support and that reassurance within the survivor, as in putting a cover, a sheet over the survivor, tucking them into bed, or if they fell asleep, downstairs, providing it can be done safely and you don't fall down the stairs. If the other half picked up the survivor, carried them upstairs to bed, maybe if it's safe, somewhat assisting in brushing the person's teeth, providing they don't bite your fingers off whilst they're dreaming, then taking them to bed, tucking them in, and then if it's at a certain stage within the relationship, getting in beside them, or if that's too far, just simply taking them to bed, tucking them in, and then the partner does whatever they need to do whilst maintaining a boundary. Doing all those actions which the survivor may have not done themselves because they were out of it, they were asleep. If they were by themselves, they may have fallen asleep in a chair. They may have fallen asleep half hanging out of the bed if they weren't tucked in, if they weren't reassured. If the other half accepts the person's sleep patterns to an extent, accepts the partner's it is taking any medication or any side effects from their past troubles, that by simple actions of taking the survivor to bed, tucking them in, making sure they're warm, secure, and in bed, is an act of reassurance and acceptance for that person and who they are, and that it is okay to fall asleep. There are no punishments or consequences for it, and that can be shown, demonstrated with time. It might be something that can't be said by the person dealing with all the symptoms, but it's what they would wish for and hope that the other half doesn't think less and accepts them for how they are and how their body is in sleeping. Maybe there can be changes, maybe sleep patterns could improve or so on, but dealing with what's in the present, in the moment, is what's most important. So that can be controlled, handled appropriately and accepted. That just adds that reassurance and value within the survivor that it is a safe environment and there's nothing to worry about. And then if they are told or acknowledge that they were taken to bed, and that's all, shows a level of trust. Because when a person falls asleep, they are technically vulnerable physically and mentally. And if at any point in the past with previous relationships, if the one with the symptoms on the receiving end had dropped off and the bad person took advantage of that physically, for example, it wouldn't do the survivor much good, especially if they were made aware of it in some way. So during times of when a person falls asleep, it can be a very, very sensitive, vulnerable time because the mind and body is kind of shut down and is resting. The self-defense mechanisms are not there. The person is disarmed. So if the other half can carry the situation, take lead, and handle it very appropriately and simply put the individual where they need to be so they're safe and comfortable, such as a bed, without any other follow-up actions, It adds that reassurance, trust, safety, and personal respect, physically and psychologically, which may have been taken in the past. It rebuilds that level of innocence which may have felt stripped previously by simply making sure a person is comfortable whilst they're already asleep. It adds that extra layer and level of protection and reassurance. And the more it's performed with that frequency, it builds stability. And with the level of stability, it can build stronger trust. And with stronger trust, it can bring people closer together, and more can come from that. So that's why it's important, as in the need of the survivor just being able to be themselves, to sleep, relax without any fear, without any worry, without any consequences at all. So yeah, there is that. The other one, tying in once again, is not just for one person, but for both people. To be able to do absolutely nothing, to remain still, and to be able to hang out in silence and in peace. What does that actually mean? That could be in a house. It could be outside in a park. It could be on a beach. It could be anywhere where both people can hang out together without having to get intimate, without having to even make physical contact, just to be in the same room as one another, to sense and feel the same things, to not be at arm's length, to not be at either end of the phone, but to physically be present, see things together, build that connection, build that trust and that safety. And as in being in a space together without much going on, just being still, kind of regains back a level of self-control and control from each other by performing the same actions, building and recreating interactional synchrony, matching the partner's behavior in body language, in communication. By matching it is the equivalent of that eye contact, looking at the other person on the same wavelength equally. Doing the same actions can bring people closer together, especially when, mentally speaking, one of the half feels very disconnected and isolated because of their internal struggles, which the other half doesn't know about or knows what it's truly like. So by doing the same activity or just staying still, it brings a level of comfort and as well acceptance, because maybe deep down, after wearing that mask all day, all hours long, pretending to be fine and okay around people and clients, being maybe busy with responsibilities, roles, tasks, and even jobs in life, at the end of the day, or on a day off or on a holiday, whatever it may be, that the survivor just, all they want to do is have a quiet life, to be in peace, in silence, but not to be alone. The hope and wish that a partner, another person, can match their energy, their wants and needs in the environment and what's done in that space, even if it means doing absolutely nothing, that can mean the world to the survivor. Matching in behavior and actions, or more so lack of action, doing the same thing, shows that acceptance, shows that want to be close, and it shows that that other half wants to be close but also be involved with the survivor. Whilst the survivor may hold things back and push people away, deep down that survivor wants to be included in things with the other people about, but they may also want to include others into their life and incorporate them into their world, but they're too scared and afraid that if they did, when welcoming them into their dark world, it might not be good. It might scare them or hurt them, harm them. So that's why there's that distance. But look, if that bubble can be created, whatever term you use, from a bubble bath to quiet time to peace, it's now time, the 1, 2, 3, 4 approach, or the strawberry bubble, whatever code word you'd want to use with one another, by building that space and using those core wants and needs, as simple as sitting still, looking at the water, looking up at the sky, looking up at the stars, and doing not much else, just to recharge and relax and have that quiet time. But to be able to share that space with another person close to, and they embrace it the same way and like it, it can build trust, but it also can build that bonding and connection when being able to do the same thing, that character building, that trust building, and much more. There might have been a time in the past that the survivor never got that chance of peace and quiet due to the noise and chaos around them, or that when they did try getting away from it all, they were questioned all the time and followed or tracked in some way. That the survivor wanted to do certain actions or activities, big scale or very simple and basic, but no one wanted to do anything with them, or that the bad partner, whenever it was suggested by the survivor, let's go here, let's go for a walk, let's go to an art gallery, let's go and get some food, the other half may have dismissed it, denied it, or said, no, I've got plans, I'm going out myself, I'm hanging out with the guys, or whoever. It put the survivor down, the one with the symptoms at the time, it put them down, made them feel devalued, made them feel like their wants and needs weren't being met or acknowledged, and that their deep needs at the time, wanting to do activities with the other half to feel closer, to bond and reconnect, was denied of or broken. So being able to do it now is what would be intensified, but hard to accept and hard to suggest it to the other partner because of the fear of being rejected again, like how it was in the past. Fear of rejection, fear of being looked down upon or thought of less, fear of abandonment. They're the core elements which hold a person back and holds their deep needs and wants inside without expressing them. Because if they express them, they feel bad stuff will happen. It's not guaranteed, and it won't always be that way, but as a means of survival, they will think that way to try and maintain a level of stability. But once again, if certain actions can be met through non-verbal communication or slowly it can be shown, that's what can build that connection. Being still, but both people being still, shows equality and it shows a form of peace. Breathing at the same time, hearing each other's breath or heart beating, shows a level of connection. It's building a frequency, a wavelength only two people would know or connect with, and everyone else around wouldn't be able to be in tune because it's something unique, it's something special, it's something exclusive, reinforcing the exclusivity of that new relationship. That need and want within, in a way, that a person dealing with trauma and response, a trauma response, can gain back control, but in the past and in between could have been gaining back control in expressive ways which they may have later regretted in life, but now is the time to express themselves the right way, to gain back control the right way, and for the other person to not take advantage of that, and for it to just be natural, normal, and even simple. Simple small actions and hobbies or activities shared together can build and start a new beginning. It gets to a new place, position. So, they're forms of physical wants, needs. What about the psychological needs and a crossover with that? For a trauma survivor, a sufferer, a person dealing with different issues and even survivor's guilt and more. A survivor would likely long and hope and desire to be heard, to be understood, to be believed, trusted, and to be remembered. What that actually means is, let's say it gets to a point in a situation, relationship, where the survivor does open up about their vulnerabilities, about their past struggles, about their encounters, how they were treated, and all the sensitive information slowly coming out. It can be hard to talk about it and bring it all up again, especially if they've been there, they've done that in the past, and relationships had failed. It doesn't get any easier. It could lead to a script, as in saying it so much or so often it becomes a broken record. It feels like that, and self-blame and shame kicks in. but it's that dread of having to go over it all over again, almost reliving it all over again. But it's, to them, it might be needed to build those foundations, to build that understanding, so then the other person actually knows what's up. But it can be hard. But if it does get to that point where the survivor can open up, they would wish to be heard and seen, as in what's said, the other person is actually listening and taking it on board. They're not distracted, they're not multitasking, full undivided attention to that other half. So that survivor feels valued, appreciated, and of worth. That the darkness and the struggles of what they're going through and talking about are understood just by the fact that the other person, the other half, is willing to listen, even if it does get tough, even if it does get difficult, remaining as that still, unwavering anchor in the other person's life, listening to the details, listening to the darkness and all, without flinching or thinking less of that person. But then also, the next want and need to be understood and believed, as in the struggles and the issues that they share and talk about, for the other half to understand, or at least try their best to understand, as in why that survivor is the way they are and why they react and act the way they do, why they may be distant at times and why they may go quiet or silent and freeze up. To be understood bridges that gap. They're dealing with those issues, the other person may not. So to the survivor, they may feel no one gets them, no one understands them, but if the other half can make an effort, or at least try to understand, it can remove that isolation. So it could encourage more healthy trauma responses and not having to deal with it alone, not having to freeze up by themselves and go into that bunker, but actually dealing with it together as a team and trying. That can happen slowly with time. The survivor would probably deeply want to be believed and validated, as in what they say is the truth and nothing but the truth. Now, of course, there are always exceptions in life with darkness where a person says things and it's not exactly true. That can be damaging. But in a circumstance where a survivor is one and has gone through bad encounters and traumatic events and it's all real, they would hope that the partner believes in every word that's said, as in their feelings, what they really think, how they really feel about their past, about previous people and the present. To be believed in can build trust. It can rebuild the survivor themselves, who may have doubted themselves, who may have felt that they were going crazy at one point and even questioned their own truths, as in, were they telling the truth? Are they right? Are they wrong? When a partner who's stable believes in the survivor, it brings back and builds that confidence back in that survivor who had it taken away by bad treatment or by being manipulated and gaslighted at times and deceived and manipulated and made to believe that they're wrong, made to believe that they're crazy. When a survivor goes through all that darkness and hell, what they've gone through, when the other half believes in everything that's said, it makes the situation more believable, more real, but more stable, and validates to the survivor that, you know, everything that happened did happen and it was impactful, and it's understandable why they're struggling and why it's difficult. It validates, it builds that confidence, it brings things back to reality on a grounded level. Being remembered is also an ultimate long-term factor. Not just being remembered for what you like, your favourite meal, your favourite colour of flowers, or your favourite football team, but more so it's being remembered as in everything that was said, or most of what was said and expressed during those deep moments, the other half remembers it in the future. The triggers, the causes, the effects, the symptoms, the low episodes, the triggers, and so on. Remembering it, or reminding that sufferer that I remember that time when you opened up to me about this or that. It brings a level of reassurance and a bit of happiness to the survivor to think, oh, you actually remembered. you cared enough to remember, or if it was written down, because not everyone is going to have a perfect memory. Writing it down on a notepad, a journal, a note thing digitally, privately, just making a note of it so it's not forgotten, because it's an important piece of information, it's an important detail, and it explains the situation, the dynamics of everything. By remembering it, beside believing and validating it within the survivor will feel accepted and validated for what they've gone through and what's happened, and in a positive, healthy direction. It's like another kind gesture and act which may have not been done in the past. So just like accepting when a person falls asleep and making sure that they're in a safe place and tucked into bed, going to that extent, going out of one's way to do that for another person, it's quite thoughtful. So by remembering a person's struggles and the core details which were explained, and all the other little details as well, if that can be remembered and acknowledged and even brought back up in conversation to that survivor will feel less weight on their own mind. Because when you're dealing with it alone, or when you remember everything alone because no one else about can be bothered to listen, or no one else can be bothered to remember it, it can add an intense weight upon a person's shoulders. Makes them feel like a catalyst in that they have to remember it all and remind themselves so they never forget of where they once were and where they are now, but it leads to re-traumatization. They just wish that they could drop it all or half it and just hope that another person could remember part of it to ease their strains, ease their struggles, and ease that responsibility. Because being stuck in the past or dealing and processing with the past to avoid it from happening again can be tiring, but on top, having to deal with it all and remind themselves, because they fear that if they forget, bad things will happen. They fear that they forget, history could repeat itself. Being on a constant loop, and if it's paired with OCD too, that routine, that ritual of it all those chores and tasks, and almost like self-torture in a way, to them they have to, or they feel they need. But if someone else was present, that understood them, that listened to them, that believed in them, saw the potential in them, and took some of that weight away, took some of that responsibility away, halved it as a team, a person's problems, whilst it's their own, halved or eased, so they don't have to take the whole battle upon themselves alone. It makes them feel less alone, it makes them feel more in a fight alongside another person, linking back to that physical want and need of standing side by side, hand in hand, facing whatever together and moving forwards at the same pace, whatever that may be, under each other's own terms, with understanding and being remembered. So the mental side as well, being remembered. So they never feel lost, they never feel led astray, and they're always remembered physically in the heart and also mentally in the mind. As simple as other situations and normal situations where one person could say, "You've been on my mind today, or over the last few days, or been on my mind quite a lot or often." That can make the other person feel good about themselves, feel like they are of worth, value, and have an impact on the other person's life. So equally, on a more deep level, when it comes to struggles and vulnerability, if the other half can remember it, and those moments and those words, those lines, those struggles, those sad, tough times and everything, and onwards in the future as well, not just the past, it just builds that reassurance and stability that they're not forgotten, they are remembered, they are of value, and their past is of value as well. Their darkness is of value too. Value in the sense of it explaining why they are the way they are and why things have gone the way it has, without diminishing it, without downplaying it. By believing, understanding, being heard, and being remembered, validates the situation, validates the past, acknowledges it all and the darkness in the right way to allow that healing and slow recovery and feeling more connected to another person. So there is that. As I said, the other psychological aspect is to feel safe, to not flinch, to be relaxed, to not feel or fear any consequences, to be at peace of mind, to be able to close one's eyes, to even rest one's face onto someone's shoulder. And that's a sign of vulnerability, because when the eyes are away from what's around, without scanning the room, especially with someone with PTSD. It can be a big change and milestone being able to shut off in a way, being in a bubble, staying still, doing nothing, trying to be calm, synchronizing it with the other person. That can mean shutting the world out, which is another big thing. It can be a survival response, a defense mechanism, but if done in the correct way, a slightly different way with someone else, builds that connection, and it just allows both or one to shut the world out without any worry or fear of backlash or consequences, which may have happened more so in the past. Now, an alternative one mentally, and also it can apply physically, is still having boundaries and space, like a bubble with a bit of distance in between. Not to be connected 24/7, not to be all over 24/7, but for the survivor, at times when they do struggle or they do need a breather, they do need a break, for the other partner to respect that and allow the survivor to move away for maybe a few minutes, a few hours, maybe even a day or two, just to recharge, relax, or clear one's head. For the other half to, acknowledge that and welcome it shows that through boundaries and space, there is a deep level of respect. And a survivor who has gone through a lot of disrespect may not feel deserving of it, but may deep down crave to be respected for once and for all. And on top with how they've been to people in the past, they've been good, others haven't been good to them. They would like it to be the other way around for once. To be respected for once and to be valued. And that respect, as said, can come from being understood, being believed in, validated, and being heard, but also on another aspect, a form of mental distance and psychological distance for the healthier reasons, some time out and a break time to be able to respect a person's boundaries. And if it's not directly physical, it could just be down to conversation. If there's a time where it's too soon or not the right time to open up about certain wants or needs or struggles, or if things are bad, they may not be ready to talk or open up, and they don't want to feel forced to open up either. So if the other half can give them the space that they need and there's communication and it's made clear, it can build that reassurance that it's okay to be quiet and it's okay to be distant because of dealing with the past within reason, and then to reconnect shortly afterwards. By building those boundaries, maintaining that respect, it doesn't reinforce the arm's length, but it actually is productive to counter it, to reduce the arm's length, but to still reassure the other person that they can have a break when they need, or take time out when they want or they have to, without any fear of consequence, without any blame of being the one abandoning the other, which they may have been accused of in the past when they couldn't take much more. See, in the past, through bad mistreatment, maltreatment, the other half, the survivor, dealing with the symptoms at the time, going through the wear and tear, the bad treatment, the abuse, the physicalness, the mental torture, may have broken them at the time and triggered a response of fight, flight, running away, or dealing with intense emotions and being upset, scared, and all that. That when they did try taking that space, or they ran away, or they took a day off, or they hung out with a friend, they got away, they were taken away, there was intervention to save them temporarily from that controlling person, that whilst they had time out to recharge or to recuperate, that when they returned back to that environment, that relationship, then the other partner did the blame game, twisted it, and said, you abandoned me, you made me feel bad. So then it makes the survivor that's already been tortured feel even worse and feel they're to blame for it, despite them going through all the hell to begin with. So for once and for all, in the present, to be able to have that space and time without feeling guilty for it, to be reassured and validated by the other half that it is okay to take time out and you're always welcome back. Providing there is communication before and after, and if there was a bit of prolonged, time needed, it's a little drop-in word here and there. Now, that type of action may not be achieved immediately. What may occur before is silence, distance, and confusion for both parties and distress within both people, and more so the survivor when they have to get away, when it's a survival response, when they're struggling and it's not the other person's fault. They're dealing and trying to cope. They don't want their darkness to consume the other. And then afterwards they feel really bad about what's happened because of the distance without explanation. And that can be very hard. But for the other half, they have to try and remind themselves it's the symptoms, it's the health problems that are doing the talking and the acting, not the actual person. It's like manifesting in other ways. So with that understanding and then slowly building that communication of it's okay to take time out if needed, it would be a code word, a little emoji to say that they need time out, a little emoji to say that they're still needing time away, or a little emoji to say that they are safe, but they are struggling, for example. Little non-verbal communication through emojis and symbols can go a long way, builds that trust within each other, and slowly reduces that distance long term. So that when a person does struggle, they may not have to consider doing it alone anymore because they can trust and rely on the other person. So there is that. And that's what ties in with the next one, complete trust. As in, no fear, no worry, and no doubt within the other partner. That the past is the past and it doesn't carry over with weight anymore on the new connection. That's an ultimate longer term hope and wish within that survivor, that they can live a happy, normal, healthy relationship and life with someone without all the deep-rooted fears and the what-ifs. Being able to shut that off or shake it off with time. And beside trust, also the element of reliance that the survivor can finally, once in life, rely on someone else instead of having to be hyper independent, dealing with all the mess themselves. And they can finally fall back a little bit and let the other person take the steering wheel at times, whether that be helping out, doing an activity, doing something, assisting them for once, supporting them for once. So kind of changes the roles, reverses it a little bit, but it also gives a bit of breathing space and time for the sufferer to relax a little bit and have that trust and belief and faith within the other person, which strengthens the relationship itself. So that's one of the core elements as well, to be able to rely on someone, because maybe the reason why it's held back and hidden within, because the survivor in the past had dealt with a lot of occasions where they just couldn't rely on people because trust was abused, trust was broken, boundaries were broken, disrespect was shown, lack of patience, lack of understanding, lack of belief, taking advantage of them during a vulnerable time would have led to that survivor feeling like they're in this battle alone because everyone that they've got close to has let them down or walked away from them. And that can be quite a hard pill to swallow. And then that internal belief that all people are the same way, at least towards me, so why is it going to be different this time round? It can cause that false belief of irrational thoughts, but to them it's genuine and real because that's all they know of. So they finally get that opportunity to rely on someone who doesn't let them down, or at least the other half tries their best and makes an effort. That's more than enough. But it may not be said out loud because due to the hypervigilance and alert levels, the survivor may still be cautious to protect themselves so they don't give all their heart to someone and then to be let down, because that would finish them off in a way. So that's another aspect. The other one is for a deep body-mind connection of being together. So not just physically in the same room, but mentally in the same room and headspace, understanding one another, building that chemistry, picking up on cues and moments, good and bad, alert levels, red flags, and moments of happiness. I mentioned it in previous videos as well, as in if something got too much or someone had a panic attack, the survivor to squeeze someone's finger a few times, pull away, find a bubble, find a quiet place, recuperate, reevaluate, tactical retreat, and breathe slow. Actions like that, where you can be mentally on the same wavelength. Both may not be struggling, but you both understand each other, as in needs for one another, or more so the partner, the other half understands the needs and the requirements in the moment for that survivor who may be struggling. That builds that deep mind connection between one another. And if it became physical, as in touch base or role play or intimacy, that can build a stronger connection between minds and what each other feels and how each other bounces off one another too. So there is that. But when it comes to that level of intimacy, the mental aspect, the physical touch, the survivor may not express it outwardly or talk about it openly or loud because they may feel ashamed of it because of how they were made to feel in the past. If they were poorly treated physically or disrespected and done without consent, they may feel ashamed, or they may not feel clean and not innocent. So being in the presence of another person, they may feel it's too risky to do, or the other person won't get them, or it will come across as overwhelming or too much. So that's why sometimes they hold off a bit. But this is where it ties on with the next one. Just because there is a body-mind connection or there's a level of closeness, it doesn't always have to lead to something more intimate or visual. As in, a trauma survivor deep down doesn't want to be sexualized, or there might be a time and place for it when there's a clear, understanding. But in all the other times, when they just simply want to rest or be at peace, to be relaxed, or just have a simple conversation without it escalating further, to be able to just wear casual clothing, to be able to let one's hair down metaphorically and literally, and just be oneself without the other person jumping on top and pouncing, metaphorically and figuratively speaking, to not be sexualized, to not be seen as an object, to not be seen as a distraction, but to be seen as a real person with real needs and wants, even in basic, normal, simple, non-invasive ways. And that can stem back to how they were treated in the past and how respect wasn't shown and boundaries weren't respected. So now a survivor is hoping that they can have that, gain back a level of control, gain back a level of self-respect, gain back a level of innocence, and be treated of value within the right ways and not one extreme or the other. And that the boundaries of intimacy is made clear, whether that be through safe words, whether that be through timeouts, breaks, hugging or holding hands, providing there are cues and there's no resistance. And if there was resistance, for the other half to respect that space. And even if it's more so driven by the past, a self-defense mechanism of flinching, a trigger, a flinch is not a lack of love or a lack of respect to the other half, but it's more because of the past. Important for the other half to not run away, to not get offended by it. Getting offended by it could further deepen that guilt and shame that survivor feels in the moment for pushing someone away indirectly. So if the other half can remain still, steady and understanding, reconfirms that understanding with the other half. When the other half, the survivor, doesn't feel good on the day or feel close or may feel a bit distant or cold, for that to be respected and understood and not an attempt to hijack that with forms of physicality and passion, because that can be counterproductive and the other person may feel either taken advantage of or mistreated or disrespected, like how they were in the past. It could re-trigger things. So it's like, not every moment has to be a sexual moment, not every situation has to lead to something. It can just be simply sitting or standing in silence and not asking or demanding for any more, keeping it simple, which is maybe something that they would hope for. But due to certain actions of the past and survival and fawning and people pleasing, a survivor of trauma may have given in to other people's demands, not because they wanted to, not because they really wanted to please the other person, but they wanted to protect their own peace. to avoid conflict, to avoid any further consequences, having to perform actions they weren't comfortable with or wanted to do and they didn't enjoy doing either. That sometimes can follow over to the present time of a new relationship where there might be bursts or periods of hypersexuality, hyper literal arousal, and it can be pure, it can be explosive, and it can be meant, but it can also be a trauma response from the past. And sometimes that trauma survivor, it may catch up on them and then think that they've done too much, given too much, or they've been exposed, or they've exposed themselves too much, and then that can trigger a wave of guilt or shame. So it's important for the other half to reassure them it's all fine, it's all okay. And then to build that back up, that, when things do go wrong, or when a person is over apologizing, to say it's fine, it's okay, and not to ask for any more, not to demand for any more. And not for it to sound counterproductive, but if the survivor felt really bad and wanted to make it up to the other person, for the other half to just say, I appreciate it, but you don't have to, or if you don't want to. Careful wording so it doesn't come across as rejection. Allowing them a bit of time to say what they were going to say, and then if they want to later, then yeah, and if they don't, or change their mind, to respect that. Because sometimes the trauma response of the past can kick in, as in people pleasing and doing something they don't want to or not in the mood to do, but they'll do it for the sake of pleasing the other person because they may care. But what should happen is anything that's done is done because they want to and the other person wants to, physically or emotionally. If one person wants to do it or feels that they need to do it for the sake of the other person that may want it, if one person wants it and the other person is unsure, it shouldn't be done. If one person wants to and the other person doesn't, then it shouldn't be done. But if both people want it, then it should be done, whatever that is. That's where the boundaries need to be. And when something is truly sexual or close, and other times when it's not, but it may be perceived that as a false vision or a false response, so the lines are not blurred. That's what it really is. Ultimately, a survivor just wants to be respected mentally and physically, with space and also closeness, even in closeness to be respected, and with the usage of safe words that can build a level of trust and reassurance on a small scale. Beside that, we said about letting go, being loose, to feel helpless, to be anchored. When things get too much or too hard, that the other person can reassure them it's fine, it'll be okay. And that's a deep need, because the survivor has had to spend most of their life telling themselves it'll be okay and fighting through it alone. And even if it's not been okay, having to convince themselves, that can get tiring. If they could just let go for a second or a minute, and then for someone else to tell them it's going to be okay. Words of reassurance reduces that isolation and distance because they hear it from another person's mouth. It builds confidence in them and trust, and reduces that hopelessness, makes them feel that there is a chance. And just when it's backed up by another person, a secondary opinion, makes them feel more sure about themselves in a situation which they were uncertain with to begin with. So that can help as well. This one's a bit more deeper. For the partner to allow the survivor, and for the survivor deep down, to process unresolved trauma and even deal with grieving for the loss of people in the past or loss of a relationship. Grieving through the complex nature and complex trauma, in being allowed to accept and acknowledge, beside all the negatives and bad treatment, the positives. It might sound counterproductive, but just having that space for the survivor to acknowledge, grieve any positives from that previous relationship, that previous ex-partner, even if they were a bad person. And why? To balance it out, to get that full closure and to process it. It's not always all bad. There are some positives here and there, even if it's tiny. But acknowledging back and forth for that balance and that perspective. And for the other half, to allow the survivor to do that perspective without being judged, without being looked down upon, that can build the trust long term and enable the person to heal in the moment and onwards when dealing with it as best as they can. And as well, acknowledging the positives from a previous ex, even if it was bad most of the time, because holding on to the positives, or at least acknowledging it, shows the balance, the critical thinking, and as well a form of staying sane without losing one's mind with all the darkness. So perspective is what's needed. Retrospective perspective from the past, them being allowed to, and the other half understanding, being believed and it being validated, right? It's all real and it's all very much needed in some way or another. Another one, longer-term, deep-rooted feel and need within a survivor is to be able to feel safe and feel themselves in their own skin. Not just the clothes that they wear, the accessories that they have without being judged, being able to wear and do what they want and express themselves, but also internally feeling more like themselves. They may have lost themselves in the past. They may say to themselves that they feel a part of them has died because of what's happened previously. They may feel like a part of them or their heart has been crushed. But the reality is, it doesn't have to be retrieved. It can be rebuilt in different ways, but built on their own terms and made to be unique to themselves. Whether that be creating a new version of themselves, a new chapter in their life, but under their terms, making it unique, exclusive, and it can't be tainted or compared to the past. Done at whatever pace or speed that's needed. Allowing the other half partner to enable the survivor to do it on their own terms or shared together when accepted. So eventually, when rebuilt and strengthened and forged, they feel more like themselves and focus on themselves and the present and the potential future for themselves and even the other half without being reminded too much of the past. It's like it's not rewriting the past or neglecting it, but it's about strengthening and rebuilding the present. Like if there was a city and it was destroyed by an earthquake and then slowly it was built back up, but built better than ever, stronger than ever, brighter than ever, or improved adaptation. That can happen with a human as well, adapting and changing and bettering oneself. Doesn't have to mean becoming like really strong or really hard-faced, but also it can mean just in behaviour, personality, regaining that, building on sense of humour, looking past the darkness and coping in more healthier ways. And being able to do that, knowing it was done on their own terms and they weren't judged, they weren't put down for it, and more importantly, they were supported by someone about making that connection closer together. So that's what can be done. Next one, reassurance, stability, frequency, and depth. The more things are done and performed and the more times it happens, it just builds that reassurance within that survivor that it's meant to be and it's real and it's validated whatever it is. Showing up, being present, building that trust physically and mentally in all the different elements that we've touched upon today goes a long way, long term. Another one is just being able to surrender, for a survivor to finally surrender to someone without any fear of pain or damage or danger, just being able to let go of it all for the moment, for a minute, for a second, whatever time it is, without any consequence. Like laying back in the water of a swimming pool without any fear of sharks, without any fear of drowning, just floating and staying still in a way whilst the other person is present, watching over, like an angel in a way. And then lastly, the biggest one out of them all, what a survivor of trauma, bad relationships, and anything else in between struggles, what a survivor deeply wants but may never say public is that they wish and hope to be loved the right way, loved for who they are, loved in a relationship despite feeling broken. If they're dealing with complex PTSD, complex trauma, they may have conditioned, deep-rooted shame or guilt within them, and blame and self-loathing and low self-esteem. They may be conscious and aware of it all, but they may also feel undeserving of a new relationship for all kinds of reasons. But deep down, if they had their voice, whilst they're standing behind a shard of glass, they can see through that glass, they can see what's ahead, they know what's good for them, they know what they want, but they can't express it because that glass is like noise cancelling. So they're screaming inside, and then on the other side, where the partner is, they can't hear or see it. So if that survivor was to break through that glass ceiling, break through that glass wall, to shout, to scream, and release everything, which is a deep need itself, to release that energy, one thing that they may wish and hope for is to be loved and treated fairly despite them feeling broken, because there is more to the brokenness, there's more to the darkness, there's more that lives on within that survivor, for all the good that they are and all the good that they've done, for the other half to be able to see that, to feel it, and to hold them up when they do fall, and then to grow from that and expand onwards in the future. To show, or for the partner to show, that the survivor's brokenness and messiness and chaos doesn't define them, and it doesn't define their future, that their struggles and their past doesn't hold them back and trap them from being able to move forwards or live better, that they're deserving of being able to feel better and deserving of being able to be loved in a relationship despite what they're going through. That's what they would possibly want within, but may find it really hard to express or say. That's what could be going through their mind. So if you know someone that may be going through that, and you pick up on some patterns and signs, consider it. And it doesn't have to be brought up to the other person immediately, but those non-verbal acts, non-direct communications, passively doing certain things which they may want or wish for, and checking for the cues and responses from them. And if it's a positive response, reinforcing it and doing that consistency, that frequency and depth behind it. Performing certain actions when it's possible, and monitoring the behaviour and responses from the survivor. And if they respond positively, on the right track, keep on going, and to build off from that. And as well for the survivor, for them to open and communicate when possible with the other half, to close that gap. So with that all being said, that's what comes down to the deep-seated needs, wants and desires. It's all valid and it's all very understandable from the survivor's point of view, and they do deserve what they wish for and hope. Provided there's communication and there is understanding and basic respect, then it can be done. It may just take time. Nevertheless, I hope you enjoyed the video and found it helpful. If you do have any questions, you can leave it down below. If you're able to hit the thumbs up, the like button, so more people get to see it, share the video to whoever you may think may benefit or need it, and just share it in general. And if you're on mobile or tablet device, down below, scroll across to hit the hype button so the video can be pushed out there, so there's more awareness and then more people can learn about these topics and themes. With that all being said, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, goodbye and good night for now.